NFL scouting combine, and the reshaping of the Washington Commanders. Logan Paulsen is here today on this episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, and you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders, and from there you will get one-on-one conversations with me, news, analysis, insight, opportunities to help form and flex the show, all via text message. No hashtags, no apps, no filters needed. You get live text from me from practices, games, events, all kinds of fun stuff going on over there. So become a Locked On Commanders insider. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders is the place to be. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering your Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com. Part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, and I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers and everydayers. You already know it, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I appreciate you for coming through. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode, we are going to talk to Logan Paulsen from the Washington Commanders team and analyst, former NFL tight end. We're going to talk about the reshaping of the Washington Commanders, but we got to start with the NFL scouting combine. All right, everybody, and we are now joined by Logan Paulsen from the Washington Commanders team analyst. I don't know why I almost mispronounced that word, but Logan, a little bit behind the curtain, man. I'm going to tell all the listeners and viewers now. We have been trying to set this up for a long time, so I'm glad we finally got you on and we're finally able to link up. It's always great seeing you, man. How have you been enjoying Indianapolis?
I mean, I've been having a great time here. I always enjoy the combine. I think I enjoy football. So I enjoy kind of going on there and watching all the drills and, dedicating 6 hours of my day to watch people run 40s and watch people run routes on there. There's something I really enjoy about it, but I also enjoy kind of the connectivity of it. Like we're hanging out yesterday, Ben Standing's there. I got to hang out with some of my coaching buddies last night. And it really is kind of like a huge NFL conference, not only for, the coaches and the players, but it's also for the media stuff too. So I really enjoy Indianapolis because of the personal stuff. And I think it's a great city. And I always have a great time coming out here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's just, like you said, it's just as much about connecting with people you haven't seen in a while as it is about learning about these prospects. I know I was witnessing you doing a really great conversation with Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus. I know that's up on the team sites, so everybody make sure you definitely go check that out. Logan's always a great time. Trevor's always a great time. So that duo of conversation, that's going to be a great conversation to check out. So make sure everybody does that. But Logan, let's get to the new people that we're meeting, and let's start right off the bat, man. We got to talk quarterbacks, right? We got the top three quarterbacks, obviously, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. Everybody's got them in a little bit of a different order. I think everybody's got Caleb number one and then the other two. But you also got JJ, Bo, Michael Penix Jr. I mean, you have a whole lot of people out here, a whole lot of quarterbacks that you figure, I mean, I don't think it's too over the top to say like 7 or 8 of these guys are going to start NFL games at some point in time in their career, you probably believe. What has really stood out from you from this quarterback class just in general? And then we'll kind of get into the weeds on the individual guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a fun class to talk about. I think because like you've got guys like Caleb, obviously they didn't do anything here, but and say what you want about him kind of off the field is he's a dynamic football player. He's got a tremendous skill set that is fun to watch. It's so unique in his ability to throw the football. His arm angle stuff is incredible. Like his ability to get good velocity on the ball without throwing with the base, the way he sees the field, the way he can run, the athlete that he is. I mean, it's just incredible. And so like, it's very unique and it's fun. I enjoy watching prospects when you get to something that is unique, a little bit of a unicorn. And so when you watch him, like I haven't watched a prospect like him. I wasn't doing quarterbacks when Mahomes came out. And so to see this, I'm like, wow, like this is something fun and special to watch. And you get to Drake May and he does stuff that again is cool to see. Like he led the NCAA in big time throws over the last 2 years. His throwing percentage over the middle of the field is like one of the highest of the top guys in this group. And he's got all the tools. Again, there's a little bit of an inconsistency to his game at times, but he's a special player, man. And I think Jaden Daniels, like his Heisman campaign speaks for itself. Like He's not throwing the ball over the middle of the field, but he throws probably the best deep ball in the class. He's throwing to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And those guys make plays for him, but then he makes plays with his legs, and he just kind of has this composure and this character about him, this competitive character that I think is great. And so, in the same way that it's fun to watch Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels brings some of that too, in terms of a unique prospect that's got dynamic playmaking ability. And again, does he have his warts as a prospect? Absolutely, but they all do. And it's just about kind of managing that risk in terms of assessing what you think they can and can't do. And the guy that threw yesterday, obviously at the combine, was JJ McCarthy. And he's a guy that the more I watch him, the more I get it, the more I fall in love with his ability. Like, he is tremendously talented as a thrower of the football. He didn't run a 40 yesterday, but when you watch the film, he's a very good athlete. And I think when you watched him yesterday, like, he's throwing with Bo Nix, and Bo Nix has a very good arm. But he kind of, I don't want to say he blew Bo Nix out of the water, but his arm talent was significantly better, right? And I think that's something that even lay people can see when you watch him play. So, kind of coupling that with the film, and again, you got to watch a lot of film to find those NFL throws. He's a guy that I can see totally why NFL teams are in love with him. He's my fourth quarterback on my board right now. He's probably like in the 20 to 30 range as a prospect, but I think he'll probably go maybe top 10, and I think these types of performances just keep cementing him as that guy that's going to keep rising up boards. Then Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and I kind of lump them in the same boat. Excuse me, but they, Bo Nix is a guy that was really insulated in his offense at Oregon. Wasn't asked to do a ton of hard stuff, but can do hard stuff. And then Penix, I think, is obviously a very gifted thrower of the football, can kind of touch, not anywhere on the field, but is very good at throwing outside the numbers, has that arm talent, doesn't take a lot of sacks. But again, throwing over the middle of the field, not his forte. And when you look at quarterbacks at the NFL level, that's something they got to do. So that's kind of that top group. And obviously some other guys through, Joe Milton friggin' put on a clinic just in terms of physical tools. He's not the most accurate guy, but man, you can launch that football. So,
yeah. That was incredibly impressive. I mean, let's stick right there real quick, man. I mean, that like you said, I mean, like, is that something you're gonna ask them to do on a snap to snap basis or anything like that? Is that can that just be your game plan? Like, we're just gonna chuck bombs and just hope that enough of them land? Like, no, but man, it is super impressive. But let's be real. Like, everybody knew he had a big arm anyway, but like seeing it in the combine like that and watching him like from the 11 hit like the 19, 18 yard line, something like that, and all that, does that, as from an evaluation standpoint, does that add like brownie points to the evaluation when you have something like that to kind of try to build around?
I mean, again, I haven't been doing quarterbacks that long, but over the last 5 years, so Josh Allen's included in that. Yeah, I have not seen anybody with his physical skill set, like as a runner, his size, his athleticism. Like maybe he threw the ball 70 yards in the air, which was awesome. But maybe the most impressive thing that he did yesterday was he ran down with the quarterbacks and the receivers, kind of when they're celebrating the end of the drill, and he does a back flip to a full flip. And he's 240 pounds. He's 6'5". Yeah. And so he's a special athlete. Like, he didn't run. He didn't do any of the running drills. But I'm fully confident he could run a 4.6 at 240. And, he's going to jump well. And he's got all, when you look at him, it's like that's what everything he could possibly want is in that player. And so, he's kicked around in college football quite a bit, going from Michigan to Tennessee. And I think there's a lot of people that probably feel that way. But in terms of taking a flyer on a guy, like in the 5th, 6th round, and you're like, we just need some depth here and we need a guy that's going to develop, like, I would jump at that opportunity, because if it doesn't work out, it's not going to cost you anything. But man, if it does, that's going to be something special. And I, this is something I've kicked around for a couple of years. I think having a guy that can run your short yardage goal line package as a quarterback and be that big body would be extremely valuable. So I think there's value even as a 5th or 6th round pick in those situations to get the football in his hands, let him break some tackles, let him get in there. So yeah, I mean, physically awesome. The film's not always there to support it, but man, that upside is very, very tantalizing. Yeah, who knows? Maybe you could be a future Taysom Hill for somebody. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. Sean Payton's still coaching, man. I mean, watch out for those Broncos on day 3. They might go take themselves another Taysom Hill. We've got more with Logan Paulsen on the quarterbacks, but we're also going to get into the other position groups from Indianapolis here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're doing that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel, who want you to get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Currently in the Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics are the favorites to come out of the conference into the NBA Finals. Meanwhile, on the Western side of things, the Denver Nuggets are the favorites to enter the NBA Final Tournament for the league this year. And it's the Boston Celtics that are favored to win the entire thing. In the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers are not only expected to do what the Eagles could not do and return to the Super Bowl despite losing this season, they're actually projected to win Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, Louisiana next season. And the Kansas City Chiefs are favored to come out of the AFC on that side of things, trying to win their third straight Super Bowl, which would be a first in NFL history. So you can bet on all of your NFL futures, all your NBA futures, or you can bet on NBA in-season props with teams and players, quick bets, live same-game parlays, all of those props and more. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day. Everydayers, make sure you come back tomorrow. It's not Mock Draft Monday, but we're going to do a little bit of a Mock Draft Tuesday, right? We've got some roster moves that we are going to talk to Logan here about here pretty soon, and we got to account for those roster moves and a new mock draft. Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with your local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. There's been plenty of Locked On Commanders content on that Locked On Sports live streaming channel because of how much we've been doing out here in Indianapolis with the NFL Scouting Combine. And we're going to continue that by continuing our conversation with Logan Paulsen. Logan Paulsen, team analyst for the Washington Commanders, joining us here on Locked On Commanders today. Continuing our quarterback conversation, Logan. So obviously you already kind of touched on it, but the top three quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, not working out here in Indianapolis. Some people are not happy with that. I think, anytime a player doesn't work out, people are a little bit unhappy about it, I suppose. I think that's more from an entertainment standpoint, though, than it is an evaluation standpoint. But some of them are taking some heat, and specifically Caleb Williams. Very first question right off the bat at the podium was asked very aggressively by a member of the media if he's just scared to compete. I mean, do you think that this label of scared to compete for those who are putting that on them, which I don't think there's a lot, but there's enough at least that the loud minority out there that's trying to sell this narrative. So obviously you know what I think about it, but do you think that is a fair label to put on these guys who don't come out here and throw a run, jump at the combine, and either wait for their pro days, or even in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s standpoint say, like, y'all are good, y'all got plenty of tape on me, right? I don't need to do this stuff in underwear. You'll see me in the NFL the next time you see me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I think that what people and fans need to understand is that this is a process that can be very, very helpful, but it's also a process that allows coaching staffs to downgrade you, right? And right now, I think Caleb Williams is definitively the number one guy. Marvin Harrison Jr. is definitively the number one receiver. So the only thing that can happen coming out of this process for them is bad stuff, right? Like Marvin Harrison Jr., we think he's fast. Like he runs a 4.2. Great. We thought he was going to run a 4.2. Awesome. But what if he runs a 4.6? And I don't see that on film. His GPS data supports that he's very fast. He's very good on the football field with pads on, but people will downgrade him and it's going to cost him some money. And I'm always like, man, I want this process to benefit the athlete as much as humanly possible. So, for example, like Johnny Wilson comes out and runs a 4.52. Great. That helps his draft stock. That's an awesome data point. Xavier Worthy running the 4.21. That's an awesome thing for them. But for these top end guys, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., the quarterback specifically, like the quarterbacks yesterday, I thought did a great job, but they're throwing to guys they don't know. And I think you watched the drills. You were out there with us, and you saw that it was inconsistent. And so if I'm that guy's agent, I'm like, hey man, let's just pump the brakes. Let's get our own receivers at the pro day. We'll make this look exactly the way we want to look and put on a show. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And he's there. He came. I think he's doing interviews. I think it's also smart not doing medical. So people are like, why? Because the only thing that happens out of that is bad for him. And so I think he's winning the process, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know a lot of people were unhappy about the medical situation too. And he said right up there, like, if you want my medicals, you'll get them when I come visit you. And I think that's honestly, that's a really smart move for himself too. I mean, this is a guy who's kind of been talked about at different levels of like wanting to control as much as he can control. And you know, these young guys entering the league don't usually have a whole lot of control. And at the end of the day, like Caleb, you know, I mean, he's got to go where he's got to go. And, you know, if he decides to do like what Jim Kelly tried to do or did do and all this stuff, that's a whole different conversation. Right. But at the end of the day, like he's not going to control who puts his name on a card first when it comes to April. So I don't have a problem with that either. I think like you want me, let me come see your facility. Let me come see you on your home turf. I think that's a really smart thing for him to do, especially when you look at the surveys that are coming out the last 2 years of what some of these facilities look like.
No, 100%. I also think that one of the things that sticks out to me about him is, and the medical process in general, I think it's important. I think it's important to help guys understand where they're at. You know, they catch all these crazy bloodborne diseases. Guys have injuries. They get surgeries coming off of this. They found like a neck thing for a prospect last year, which is great. I love that. But the problem is, like, if I'm having a medical visit with 15 different teams, I'm getting x-rays and MRIs 15 different times. And I don't think that's always fair to the athlete to be exposed to that amount of radiation. And that's not great for them. So if he doesn't want to do that, like, more power to him. And, you know, he's in a position where, like you said, he can control the process and control it, man. Good for you.
Yeah, 100%. Logan, let's get to some of the drills that have already taken place. We got offensive linemen coming up Sunday, and that's what you and I are getting ready to head out to after this recording. So we're not going to talk about those results here on this episode. But day one, we had some defensive players out there, D-ends, D-linemen, linebackers. What did you think about that group?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny. Like, I really enjoy the drill work when it kind of helps like reveal new information. You know, so Dallas Turner supposed to be a physical freak. I mean, he was a physical freak, 4.47, 4.43, whatever it was. And he jumped 40 inches, looked like that dude, long arms. You see Chop Robinson's a guy that I think really helped himself. Everyone knew he was going to be that guy, but running the fastest 10 of a non-skill guy at the combine, awesome. I think you see a guy like Darius Robinson run that slow 40, relatively slow 40. It was like a 4.9 something, but all the other explosive measurements were there. The field work was great for him. So I don't know. I think that group tested well. Byron Murphy is another guy who I thought had a great day. Came out and kind of said, like, I deserve to be the first defensive player taken. And I just love when you see that Chris Jenkins, the guy from Michigan, I think everyone thought of him as a true run stuffer, comes out and runs a 4.9. Like, it was awesome, man. And I like when guys, again, help support narratives. And we were just talking about the combine being detrimental for some guys. I think all those guys help themselves. And I love seeing guys help themselves. I love when guys come out and say, hey, I am this, and I am, you know, this is the biggest job interview of my life, and I'm knocking it out of the park. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we move on to the next day. We already talked quarterbacks. We also had running backs. You also had receivers. Who stood out from those two groups from you?
I mean, there's so many receivers, just the depth of the receiver class. So Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't do anything, which is fine. Like, that doesn't bother me really, because they'll do stuff at their pro day. But Roma Dunze runs a 4.47. And I think the thing that was most impressive about his day to me was his field work. Like, he just was on the field, the way he ran routes, the dexterity with which he ran, I thought was fantastic. And you just see, like, that's what a top 5 pick in the draft looks like. And I just have a lot of respect that he came out, and he didn't have to. He could have not run his 40, but he did it, and he looked great doing it. Brian Thomas Jr. was another guy. He dropped a couple balls. I'm well aware of that, but I always thought of him as a guy that was just a vertical route tree guy. He comes out, he's sinking his hips, he's getting it out in cuts, he's not slipping. I'm like, wow, that's a guy who's excellent in that regard. You know, Blake Corum, you mentioned running backs, was a guy that you're kind of like, what is his role? Because he's so undersized. He's 5'7.5". But I thought he caught the ball way better than I thought he would. Ray Davis from Kentucky is another guy that he's just like a football player's football player. But for him to come out and test relatively well, and I thought catch the ball pretty well, was great. Jalen Wright from Tennessee, you know, with that tremendous 40, the 5-yard split mile per hour metric they had up in the stadium, 15 miles an hour is the fastest for a back since they've been keeping that metric. That's awesome. The running back from Louisville, Guerdo, I think is his name. For him to run the 4.3, for him to jump 41 inches, for him to have that 11-foot broad, makes you go back and rewatch the film. And there's a guy that, kind of like Elijah Mitchell a couple of years ago, no one thought was that explosive because of the type of offense he was in. And then you're like, wow, this is actually an explosive playmaker with great contact balance. He's going to make a football team a whole lot better. So like, we could go, like, there's, you know, Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkney, like the receivers, there's probably 15 guys, and that's the nature of the class. But it was great to see all of them come out and put their stamp on the combine in such a definitive way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you're right. Like the receiver groups coming out in the NFL or in the NFL draft have been just really impressive, for the last handful of years, really. And you almost wonder, this is a totally different conversation for another time, but you almost wonder, like you see a guy like Mike Evans who, wants to stay in Tampa Bay, wants a new contract, wanted one in the beginning of last season, but the Bucs are essentially letting him hit free agency. And they're kind of telling him like, hey man, go see what the open market offers you. We want to match it if possible. You know what I mean? But they're basically kind of try like telling them without telling them like, hey man, like what you're asking us for is not realistic. So go find that out for yourself and then let us bring you back on a fair deal. And I think that the amount of talent that comes out in the NFL draft these recent years is a big reason for that. But yeah, man, like you said, Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville was a guy that I'm not gonna I'm not a draft analyst. I don't work for the Draft Network, Pro Football Focus. Like I don't know all these guys coming into events like this. So I love seeing guys like him pop off, not just on the 40, but like you said, in the drills. Looked really smooth, looked really good, and I think he has kind of a skill set that the Commanders might be looking for this April. If the right pick is there and he's still on the board. So certainly some guys making some money for themselves. The Washington Commanders are in the middle of a reshaping, not a rebuilding. We're going to talk to Logan Paulsen about that next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What is the first thing you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? If we had an extra hour on this episode, I would have much more of Logan Paulsen for you, but we'll make sure to get him back on really, really soon. Maybe you would go for a run, take a nap, read a book, show up for a friend in need if you had that extra hour. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time, feel like there's not enough hours in the day. The question is, what is that time going to be used for? If your time was unlimited, how would you use it? Because the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what is important to you and make the important the priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do it more. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you need to switch at any time for any reason, there's no questions asked and there's no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's shift gears, though, to the reshaping of the organization. That's what I'm calling. I know Adam Peters wanted to stay away from the word rebuilding and all that stuff, but obviously a couple of moves made here this week while we were here in Indianapolis, confirmed by the team. Offensive tackle Charles Leno, tight end Logan Thomas, not going to be on the team anymore. Both veteran guys, both really good locker room guys from everything that I know. Let's start with the tight end. Let's start with Logan. What has he meant to this team, and what do the Commanders have to replace now that he's no longer with the organization?
Yeah, I think the thing that you hit the nail on the head there with Logan is he's such a great locker room guy. He's such a great person to have in the building. He's so open, and he's just a great guy. Great leadership from an interpersonal connectivity standpoint, and that's always tough to replace. But I do think with an older guy who maybe, I don't think was playing badly, but definitely not playing up to the level of the contract he received, especially the last year. And that's not entirely his fault. We're going through different offensive coordinators, different offensive perspectives, and that can definitely affect your production. It's time to move on. And I think like those older veterans in these kind of retooling situations, like you put it, tend to be the first to go. And so I think the important thing now for this organization is making sure you find somebody that has the kind of cultural mindset that you're looking for, right? The ability to come in and say, this is the standard of play that we want to accomplish here, and we want to hold everybody in this building to. And that can be done through a free agent, that can be done through a draft pick. But I think making sure you find somebody that, again, encapsulates your vision for the team offensively is going to be extremely important. And then obviously you want to find a good football player and again, right now, the kind of fun thing about the Commanders is we don't really know who offensively they want to be yet, right? We were trying to figure out, what does Cliff want to do? I know he's kind of wants to kind of step away from that air raid moniker, but he's very good at that stuff. He's very good at the pass game. He's very good at understanding and finding matchups. A tight end is a really good way to exploit those matchups and find matchups through personnel. So I think it's going to be whoever they bring in, it's going to be extremely important. And I think you want a guy that's going to help kind of toe the message and say, like, this is who we want to be moving forward as a Washington Commander.
Yeah, and I think Charles Leno, you pretty much say the same thing, especially about his veteran presence in the locker room as well. And I'm really curious about like the chess match that really is the offseason as far as like going into the NFL draft. Talked to several GMs who said like the goal going into the NFL draft weekend is that nobody knows exactly where you need to or have to go. And when you look at, letting go of Charles Leno Jr., like I don't see an exact like this is your plug and play starting left tackle now that Charles Leno's no longer on the roster. I know Trent Scott's got some experience there, stuff like that, but I just don't see that guy. So it's like if you don't sign someone in free agency that could be the starter, at least, and maybe not a slam dunk starter, but could be, then everybody kind of in April knows like, hey, like the Commanders need a left tackle. So if they're coming up on the clock and we want this guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how Adam Peters navigates the chess match that is roster building in the offseason. But I want to get to Dan Quinn with you, Logan. You have history with Dan Quinn. So for Commanders fans who don't know about that history, can you kind of cover that history and what the Commanders are getting in their new head coach?
Yeah, so I played for Dan Quinn when I was in Atlanta in 2017, and my time in Atlanta under Dan Quinn was some of the most enjoyable of my playing experience in the NFL, like of my career. And I credit a lot of that to Dan, because Dan is a guy who I think is a wonderful human being, just a top-notch A+ human, a guy that he just makes you feel like you're very important. He respects you, and that's something that I really appreciated about my time there with him. And I think like his ability to build a culture, a work environment that is exciting, that's fun, that gets people engaged is very unique. Again, like I played for 10 years. I was in college for 5. I never was a part of a culture of a work environment that was that way, where I was like, man, I can't wait to get to work today. I can't wait to get on the field with those guys. And he did a great job of bringing the right type of people in, the right coaches in. And I think that's honestly his superpower. And so I love the fact that, in his press conference, he said, like, that's what I'm really good at. I need to focus on that, of being the head coach, and let my coordinators and let the personnel people make their decision. Because I will say, like, he's a guy that wants to take on as much responsibility as possible. He's a guy that's all about extreme ownership. And I think for him, like, to identify that that's something that is a strength, but can also be a weakness if you stretch too thin, I think is fantastic. So I have nothing but awesome things to say about Dan. I think when you talk to people here at the Combine about Dan, you're not going to find one person who has one bad thing to say about him, because he's a great leader. He's a smart guy. He knows how to motivate and get the best out of players. And so I'm just really excited for him to be here with the second opportunity to hopefully maximize and kind of cement his legacy as a guy that I have a ton of respect for, but now hopefully the rest of the league can see that as well.
That's awesome, man. And and I can tell you, as someone who spent a lot of time as an organizational leader, not in the NFL, but in other walks of life, I can tell you, like, being told by someone that my time working with or for you was the best time, my professional time, like, that is the biggest compliment you can give to someone. So great stuff, Logan. Appreciate you coming on, man. We can't let it be, as long as it was to get you here the first time for the next time. Always dropping good stuff, man. About like 30 other things I wish I could talk to you about here on the episode, but we do got to let you go. I know you got work to do, so I appreciate you taking time out for us, man. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, bud.
Great conversation there with Logan Paulsen. Hopefully all of you enjoyed it as much as I had, or as much as I enjoyed having it. Coming up tomorrow, we will be back here with another episode of Locked On Commanders. We're going to do a mock draft Tuesday, kind of formed around the offensive tackle, tight end openings that the Washington Commanders just opened up and confirmed. So make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly as a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get in on that today. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Every day, thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. And until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time right back here for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.